This is episode number 169 of the Smart Marketing Show, Marketing Tools, the Changing Landscape. This show is brought to you by WordPress, Maker's Desktop Server. They make local WordPress development easy. Check them out over at serverpress.com. And The Query, the new show that we have on the WPwatercooler network. Check it out at The Query at WPwatercooler.com/The Query. Thank you very much for our Patreons over on Patreon. Go check it out at patreon.com/WPwatercooler. I'm Jason Tucker. I'm an IT director and web developer. And this is my friend Jen Miller. She's a founding director and CEO of Nextdoor Marketing. And her friend Amber Peachin. She's a storyteller, writer over at amplitude.media. Hey, how you doing, folks?
Great. How are you?
Good. It's going good.
Good morning.
It's going to be hot today. It's going to be fun, but we'll make things happen. Good old Southern California. You never really know what's going to happen here. So,
well, we know what's going to happen here. We're in Arizona. It's going to be hot.
It's going to be hot.
It's just going to be hot.
Yeah, 4 months. It's kind of guaranteed. It's going to be hot, and it is what it is. So today we're going to be talking about marketing tools, and man, there are a lot of ways that we could go about this episode because of the different ways in which marketing can be done, as well as we were even talking during the pre-show of content creation and how you can kind of put all those pieces together to even be able to market. Where should we take this? Where do you two want to start?
Well, Amber, why don't you tell us what you've been doing in this changing world? Amber and I saw each other at WordCamp Phoenix, and she was there marketing herself, marketing her business, but also making friends and being in the community. And I know she has a lot of ideas on what we can be doing now, but also how we're managing that transition. And I think that's why we decided on this topic, was just so we could get that out in the open and talk about it.
Well, I think it's just, if you're going to be in marketing at all, you have to be willing to learn and evolve constantly, whether it's how you're doing your business or what tools you're using or what skills you need to have. It's continuously evolving. And if you don't evolve, then you become stagnant and not relevant anymore. Especially because technology is constantly changing, as we know. But then it's even as marketers ourselves, how do you learn the new technology? How do you stay up to date? All of the different things. And then my favorite thing is that because of the kind of marketing I do for people, I get to learn about new topics all the time too. So I get to dive in and learn all about a completely new industry or a completely new part of an industry in order to effectively market somebody's business. And so for me, it's really fun to do that. It keeps my ADD brain super happy to be like, oh, I'm going to think about this other thing and scroll down this little hole. And so it's for me, it's fun, but it's not always everybody's cup of tea. And so it's, I think, good to talk about how to have, even as marketers, we have to have an entrepreneur mindset all the time. What can change, what can be different, how can we approach this or think about this differently, and always be learning to be effective. So
yeah, before COVID-19, we spent a lot of time dealing with running around with our phones, using our phones, our iPads, our tablets, our whatevers, and using all those mobile devices as our way of kind of creating that content, be it graphics that we're using on things with Canva or something, or getting into Photoshop and actually doing things through Photoshop. Using web-based tools to kind of, do things, but doing all these things on our mobile devices. That's kind of changed a little bit at this point, because you do have the opportunity to sit at your desk a little bit more and maybe use the tools that are at your desk. And so, this topic's one of those ones where it's I could tell you 500 things that you could do on this device, but is that device the best thing to use or not? And in a changing world, which we're essentially going to maybe flip and flop, we kind of have to kind of work through this a little bit and see what our best approaches are for those tools. Let's start off with just the basics of things that you can actually build. you have audio, you have video, and you have graphics. Like those are like the three, main pieces of those tools that you could at least generate something to promote or to make.
You also have communities, Jason. So you can take those things and
I didn't realize that.
To different portals, different, whether it's a Facebook group or a bulletin board, in the old days, or
right.
Or even now sometimes, or it's a chat that you're having on Twitter. You have these platforms that you can bring these tools into. And I think that's what Amber's probably been doing a lot more of, is building that community, right? Or not?
Well, I feel like I'm always building community, I guess. I don't know. Just because I like to say I'm making friends. That's what I prefer to do versus anything else, whether it's in marketing or not, whether you're making friends for your business or making friends for your individual personally. But I also think that it's the tools will change and the tools will grow. And it's really about, I think I almost want to say, rather than the specific platforms, it's almost about how do you have like that education mindset, the always learning mindset, where it's like, and a lot of times it's a matter of saying, I need to learn this thing in order to do this thing more effectively for a client, right? And so then you dig in. And so how do you, because I know we're all about the same age, I think, right? And I feel like my kids are sometimes are disappointed because I'm tech savvy enough to be onto them, and always like, and a lot of moms are like, I have no idea, or dads or whatever, because they're just not in that world. So how do you you have to stay up on top of things when it comes to when a new social media platform comes out, when a new way of doing things just in general comes out. And one of the ways I do that is through community and through boards, and like paying attention to things on Twitter, paying attention to the people who are also in the space with me, and listening, especially like when TikTok first came out, and everybody was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And it's like, oh, it's just kids doing videos. I have a handful of people that I follow that are like 3 years ahead, I feel like, when it comes to social media platforms. And so when everybody starts getting like all up in arms about it, I'm like, oh, I already know about this, because I've been paying attention. I've been reading articles. I've been following along on the on different conversations, things like that. And so that's when it's like, I think who you're with, who you're rolling with, essentially, even if that is virtually or digitally, helps you stay just at the front end of the conversation and the tools, and to know what it is. But it's also having that, I joke, I have 7 sisters, but one of my sisters was the sister that we would always, she's the third to the youngest, and she would always be one step ahead of what the trend was, whether it was a fashion trend, a clothing trend, a new way of eating, a lifestyle trend, or whatever. She's always on that front end of it. And we would make fun of her and tease her and give her a hard time. And then it was like, once I realized, like, oh, she's just like 9 months ahead of the rest of us. So rather than like tease her, now you can be like, okay, this is what's going to be happening in 9 months. And then it would happen. And I'm like, okay. So once you start paying attention, and so there's the same people that are in the marketing space that are like, the moment I know, like my friend Vincent starts talking about how advertisers are going to be using TikTok, I'm like, I better figure out what TikTok is. And I better go like see what he's seeing and hearing and doing. And then I'm aware of even where it is I need to be learning things. But
yeah, I mean, that even happened with Twitter. So like when Twitter first started, it was just a text message. You send a text to 40404. And then you send a text, and then you received all the tweets as text messages back to you. And then you would have to you could track and follow, different words that were being said. And there was just super duper basic. But because of the fact that I started out using it at the very beginning, I felt the pains and the gains and the evolution of it, and you get to that point where it's like, okay, I understand how the system actually works, because back in the day this was way harder to use than it is now, and I have way more respect for the fact that now on Twitter, I could kind of say, I only want to tweet to my friends. I only want to tweet to specific people. I only want to do, like, they're just adding more of those sorts of things. And you need to kind of know how all those pieces of that tool set actually work.
Well, I think it's helpful too, if you're on the front end of things, to be able to, you have a broader audience. And like, I didn't even know that about Twitter. Like, I'm a super slow adopter when it's come to Twitter. Like, now I prefer Twitter over any other social media platform at the moment. But I have been like a super, super slow adopter. And so it's been one of those things where I'm like, okay, what else do I need to be doing to make sure I'm not that slow end adopter, essentially? So,
right. Well, I know that like Jason, Bridget, and I were using Google Meet, but then I heard my son. I mentioned something about, oh, are you meeting with your friends on Zoom? Because it was a birthday party he was going to. And he said, oh, no, Mom, we use Google Meet. Like, Zoom is so old school. And it was just so funny to me that my 13-year-old is getting so accustomed to living virtually now because he's had a whole summer to do this, right? Because they started at the end of the school year and they migrated through a couple of platforms trying to figure out what was a good fit for the kids. And now the kids have kind of started exploring on their own. But I thought he was still using Zoom because I just didn't even consider that he would have explored another option for that. And so it's pretty interesting to me. And I know that I'm always being introduced, like you were saying, TikTok, there's so many others, that I find out about because of my children or my friends' children before the adults are necessarily talking about it. So,
but it's super fun to be the one that your kid goes and says, so I made an Instagram account, and I'm like, oh, cool. You want me to follow you? And she's like, I don't know. And I was like, well, and then she looked like, what's your Instagram? And I was like, Jason Tucker. And she goes, oh, let me look. Oh my gosh, Dad, you have so many people following you. What's going on? Because like she has 20, and it's her 20 people. And she's just like, for real, Dad? That's crazy. And then she's, I walk down the stairs and I hear her talking to her friends saying like, my dad has a lot of followers on Instagram. What's going on with that? A lot is relative, obviously, but a couple thousand followers. I was someone who I impressed someone, so that was fun for a minute.
Yep. Well, back in the day, I used to keep track of what my kids and their friends were doing just by being friends with their friends on social media. They'd invite me, I'd say yes, and before I knew it, I was in the hub. Like, I knew when the events were happening before my kids even said anything about them, and so social media really helped me to be more social and interactive in my kids' lives and, prevent some things too, just because I was aware. And when other parents would be like, well, how did you know? And I'm like, well, I saw it on Facebook. And they're like, what? Because they hadn't nurtured those relationships. I always tried to be the cool mom, right? So that my kids' friends liked me. And I didn't try to be, I just was, right?
Right. I would say if you try to be, then you're not. You just
it was just a natural thing. But I used to have kids over, and we'd cook together and play together and go places together. And so I find that it's not just for the kids. It's if you want to be connected to people, you've got to be involved in their lives, and that's what. Yeah. Now we're finding out that it's not always being in person, that we can really establish a good virtual relationship by being active on all these platforms, or active to the extent that we allow ourselves. I have had a really hard time with too much screen time. Like, I look at my computer and it's the last thing I want to do these days. And I had never had that as a part of my life. I used to love to just sit down and write for hours, and it's hard for me now. And part of that's I'm in school, in my master's program. So that takes, a portion of my time. And, but I'm just not as drawn to it. And I think it's because it's just ever present, and so I think we're all battling that to some extent. So we have to be choosy about what we use.
So maybe the phone is the place that you are able to make that content and put all those pieces together to be able to interact with them. And you use, maybe that's why your kid was not wanting to use what everyone uses at school, Zoom, to do this stuff, but it was okay. It felt good to go use another thing instead. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Let's transition a little bit into like those actual tools that we're using and those pieces that we're doing. So yeah, we talked about Twitter, and we haven't really talked about like Facebook or even LinkedIn. Where are we on that, and what's the best approaches for using like LinkedIn in your business versus Twitter or Facebook?
Well, I think it's gonna depend on what kind of business you run, right? Like everything is going to be different based on the businesses. But I guess for me, it's more of a like, how do you use it most effectively right now when you don't know what the world's going to be like in 6 weeks or in 4 months, right? How do you shift and change and evolve? So if your main tool for building your network before was in person, going to meetups, going to like entrepreneurship meetings in your local city, going to whatever the conferences, things like that, how do you transition that onto a virtual ability? It's easy to connect with people virtually that you already know. How do you do that with people you don't know? So how do you reach out? And LinkedIn feels like it would be the natural place to do that, right? But I'm going to caveat here, like I've noticed, like in the last COVID, in the times of COVID, I get 5, 6, 10 different connection requests a day of people who I don't know, have never met. And if they include an intro note, it's very clearly like auto-generated or copy paste. Like they don't know who I am. They haven't even read my bio. They're just trying to build their network in the same way that when you go to like a business happy hour event where it's like somebody, right, it's the card shuffler who's just like, I need to hand my card to as many people as possible. And I'm just going to walk up and be like, hi, my name is Amber Peach and I run Amplitude Media, and this is the things that I do, and here's my card. We should be in touch. And then I go to the next person. And they're like, and they toss your card and they don't even care, right?
Right.
And it's like that as individuals, but it's also like that as companies. And I think it's that best practice of always understanding who it is you're trying to connect with and why. And starting by knowing who they are and what they're interested in, rather than starting with who you are and what you want to sell them.
I have gotten like probably, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 a day of messages. I get the messages that you're talking about too, that are that copy paste or it's just a bot. But I also get ones that seem like authentic connections, where they're like, oh, I see you're new to the area. I am involved with this group in Phoenix, that kind of thing. And those have felt good. I'm like, wow, I made a new connection. And we have a conversation back and forth. And so that's, there is that happening. And then Jason, what I was going to say is I've been watching, I'm not one to watch a ton of video. It just doesn't keep my interest. But I found that there are people on Instagram and on Facebook who are doing short videos. And, I'll give them the 30 seconds just so they can get their hits up or whatever. And I'm getting involved because they're being much more vulnerable. It's less salesy and much more checking in. And this is what's going on with me. And I find that really is appealing to me because I'm getting to know the person behind the brand. And so that's been a way that I've seen people using video marketing anyway in business. And even Bridget did it on her website. We had a show about landing pages, and then she went ahead and implemented that and placed a video on her page. And she said that it's resulted in higher conversion. I don't know if she's listening now. I think she's driving to see me actually. So, I think that is definitely a tool that we're seeing used more frequently. on all the platforms. Not LinkedIn as much, although I have seen some videos like in stories come through.
I've noticed a lot more of those shorter conversations as well. And they're usually people who are promoting a personal brand. But it comes across as it feels like this intentional connection that they're trying to have an actual conversation. But it also there's one person she's her that I follow that I've recently just fallen in love with her content and her as a human too, Dr. Patrice Berry or Bertrice Berry. And she the way she frames her face in the camera, so it's very up close, and like just the expression she uses, and she always starts, she's like, "Hi, I'm Dr. Patrice Berry, and I want to tell you a story." And then she tells you this story that just wraps around, like you don't know where she's going, and in the end, she ties it up in this beautiful little bow, and it's like a gift that she's giving you. And then she ends with, "I love you," every single time, which, if in my marketing classes, a million years ago, if you would have been like, the way you build your brand is to, blah, 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 and then always tell people that you love them. Like, it doesn't say that anywhere in any marketing
Right.
at all. But it's like, it's still, and that's where it's like, I feel like the nuts and bolts of being good at marketing is being genuine and being authentic. Whether your brand is a brand or a person, like it's that connection. Once you make that connection, like I feel like she comes into my house every day and tells stories, gives me a hug. Like that's how it feels. And if we can all and I think that's the biggest change for me right now, thinking about that as we're trying to reach out to the people who we're more distant physically than we've ever been as people, right? And I feel like there is a lot of digital burnout, not just with creating content, but also with consuming content. And I feel like for myself personally, and in people I've seen, the thin veneer of fake marketing doesn't work anymore. Like it was already going the way of it already wasn't working, but I feel like COVID has intensified it, where people don't want to be sold; they want to be taken care of, because we're all in such a tenuous spot, and we're all living in this uncertainty, and honestly, it's the ongoing trauma of feeling like our lives and our livelihoods are at threat or threatened all the time. And so when that connection isn't made with genuine interest and care, people and the first part of COVID, it was in these unprecedented times, blah, 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 blah. We're thinking of you, and this is what we're doing.
Street videos all over the place.
Right.
Buy a Toyota. And it's like, what? And so now it's and that was how I feel like brands tried to adjust to the changes that were happening. And so I feel like right now, we're all at home and we all have screen access all the time, and getting people's attention is hard because there's so much content, but at the same time, it's hard because people just don't want to be sold. That has increased 1,000%. And I feel like the most useful thing you can do is find out what your audience really needs and how you can really help, and then help them, which isn't rocket science. It's not new, and it's not groundbreaking, and it's really not sexy, because it's one of those things where it's do they need you to show up and give them a hug every day? Maybe not if you're Toyota, but but if you're an author and a writer and a speaker, then maybe that's what they need. Or maybe a friend of mine shared the new Snickers commercial yesterday, and it's the first commercial I've seen that addresses the entire situation, gestures wildly everywhere, with humor and understanding. And it's this guy, I'm just going to spoil it for you. So this guy walks out, and he's dressed on top, and he's in his whitey tighties on the bottom, right? So business on top. And he walks out on the porch, and his wife is talking to him. She's like, "Are you here? Are you ready?" And he walks out, and he's like, and there's another couple sitting on their back patio. And he's like, I thought this conversation was going to be on Zoom. And she's like, no, real life. Real life, honey. He's like, all right, I need to change. and it's hilarious because it addresses the absurdity of the world that we live in anymore, right? Without saying anything about in these unprecedented times or anything like that. Instead, it's like, it's funny and it gives you that laugh of, it's that humor release of like, we all get it and we've all done it. Like, as far as like showing up and you're like ready to go, but not really. You just roll out of bed and you're still in pajamas. And it's, but
stand up, Jason.
I'm wearing. I walked into the room, but Amber knew I was fully clothed.
I was checking. I was just making sure. But that's where, like, I think that it's like a mentality and a mindset and reading the room, essentially, as marketers, that is almost the most important thing right now. But it's not new. It's always. And so,
because the product's supposed to provide a solution. The marketing is supposed to show how the solution can be implemented, and the advertisement is the look. Here's a solution. Look, here's an here's it's like all those pieces all tied together. So that marketing needs to be the part that really kind of brings it, right?
Right. Well, and that's where it's like, being able to know where your audience is and how you need to talk to them as marketers is perhaps the biggest tool out there. But I don't know. I think for me too, it's like, times are changing constantly. The world's constantly changing. There's always a new tool. How do you, and this is something that I struggle with, how do you stay aware of all of the new tools that are out there without spreading yourself too thin, but also like if you talk project management tools, there's 10,000 different options, right? Every option is going to take you a minute to figure out and then to implement all your stuff. How do you help? Right. How do you stop from trying to continuously jump to the next newest and greatest thing versus using the thing you have and building the best system you can on it? Like, how do you? And my business partner always wants to jump to the new shiny thing, and I'm always like, I'm in the system. I want to stay where I'm at. And so it's like, how do you balance that difference between being on top of the newest thing while also like maintaining momentum and systems and processes where you're at?
I just this week, my agency uses Basecamp, and we use Basecamp 3.0, and I got an email saying, check out the new, advances that we made. And I didn't even read the email because I was like, I can't handle anything new right now. Sorry, and I'll go back to it. I put it in my folder to review, but it's not something that I wanted to even consider in that moment, mm-hmm. And it's just because what I have right now is working. Everybody's happy. Everybody's productive. Let's just keep it rolling, but at the same time, I know there's always room for advancement, and there's the new and the shiny and the, but that doesn't mean that this is the time where I want to spend that time on improvement. It's not the time I want to spend on growth. Like, there are different stages and cycles every business has. And I think it's important as business owners, but also as the marketers who represent those business owners, that we take stock of where we're at and what is the business focused on doing moving forward before we employ any of those kinds of marketing steps or think about new tools and tricks, because sometimes that can be too overwhelming and it can undo your existing processes.
Yeah, you have the people who buy the brand spanking new model year car. You have the people who buy the second or third year in that new model year car. And then you have the people that don't even know that there's a new year or that there's a new model year or that a model year actually even exists. So, and the thing is that you don't want to be the first one, but you also don't want to go and buy the last year of that model year, because you're going to be stuck with a car that looks old compared to everyone else's. So you don't want to be dragged along through like that, that analogy might not work with this next piece, but like you don't want to be the last person to have to upgrade because they're forcing you to upgrade. That's when you really get stuck. That's when you're like, my phone won't open up the apps anymore because it's running too old of an operating system, and the phone itself will not run the latest operating system as well. So, you kind of, Jen, be in the middle there somewhere. If you want to wait it out and let everybody else kind of figure out the bugs, that's cool. But I wouldn't wait till they like drag you into the next one, because
no.
Really
I'm always near the front of the middle, but but I don't respond to the email that I got today and jump in tomorrow. So,
but that's actually an interesting, when you think about marketing products and services to people, how do you overcome other people's resistance to change? And change fatigue is like, that's a term that I've seen, is like that whole, I've already upgraded this software 14 times. I'm not doing it again. I'm done. You can't make me do the latest and greatest thing. And also, like, how do you, it's interesting to think about model years of cars as an example, because the thing that always seems to surprise people is when something old becomes new again. So like Google Meet, like we were talking earlier, I've been a fan for a while just because I've had problems with Zoom. I had one client set that for some reason just couldn't ever get Zoom to work for them. And they were 1,000 years old, and that might have been part of the problem. But it was like, and so we ended up using Google Meet because that's where they could hang out. And I've just found that it just works really well for us. And now it is like people, because Zoom has become so popular and because of all of the other things, but then it also has some security issues that have been problems for people. And it's like people are jumping back to these other platforms, and it's almost like it's the retro fashion, right? Where it's like, it's, so if you talk about the new model year versus a couple years older model year for cars, like I got really excited when I bought a car that was a 1999, and I bought it a year ago. But it's my van that I'm buying. It's my van that I'm building to travel and live in and all of those things, right? But now that's a cool, popular thing that a lot of people are doing. And it's like, so what's going to be the retro thing? Is Google Meet the retro? Or is it like when a couple of years ago, everybody was buying Polaroid cameras again? Like, how do you figure out what that is? Because that marketing angle to me is always so interesting, is where it's like, here's this thing that's kind of fallen the way of oblivion, but we're going to bring it back, and it's going to be pretty shiny, new, and fun. And it's like, how do you recreate it and give it its own thing? And can you? Oh, Rich is right. People do. I procrastinate my cooking tools. Yeah. I feel seen in the back right now.
I'm looking at the comments, and Jason, you want to talk about this?
Well, like for instance, Rhonda's saying that the new Apple processors come out this fall, and she's totally buying the last model of the iMac with Intel. With that sort of technology, there's some pluses to that, because you can buy like the best of that model if you want, and get the longest amount you can out of that. But when the new thing comes out, slowly but surely, the different software that comes out for that particular computer may not be, or may not want to be, compatible with the old stuff. And that's where, Rhonda is probably going to have maybe a couple years with that, and then come to see that some of the newer technologies just aren't going to, to be as compatible. But I like what she's saying with this, but also I'd be a little scared, just because of the fact that I know that there's new things that come out that go, we're not using any of that old tech. We're only going to use Apple Silicon. We're not going to do any of the Intel stuff. That's it. And you're like, oh, this thing isn't compatible because they just chose it to be. I mean, for instance, you can't, iPads came out, and Instagram still doesn't have an iPad app. If you want to run your entire business off your iPad, you can, but you're gonna be using Instagram in iPhone mode, and you're gonna have that big like 2x and 3x little X up in the corner there in order to make it zoom in, and you're not gonna have the the experience that you were expecting. That there's also probably a whole lot of other issues behind that as well. But yeah.
Well, and 3 or 4 years ago, when my MacBook Pro, you know, when they redid the MacBook Pros and put the light sensor bar and with the emojis and all that on the laptop, I went out and bought one. You know that, Jason, right?
Yeah.
And I replaced it twice, you know, because it wasn't the first time it had nothing to do with me. The second time it's questionable whether or not it was me, or either way, AppleCare took care of me. But I probably should have waited a little bit longer and not been first to the game to get the computer. It's just I was leaving for a trip. They came out with a new one. I didn't want to take my old. I wanted something lighter, so I went and bought it, and didn't put enough thought into that purchase ahead of time. And you know that they, I think, later came out and said that first round there were issues. You know, because I know plenty of people who had issues who did the same thing I did, and so
Right.
buying that first year computer, car, whatever it is, sometimes you need to wait.
And that goes back to what Amber was saying about essentially reading the room or reading the community and kind of looking to see like what are other people using and how are they benefiting from having that. And that's the best way to do it. You got to ask people. You got to figure out. I always look on social media, especially like on Instagram, and looking to see like what tools are people using to generate video that they're putting on Instagram, or little montages that they're using. And you can kind of tell, because sometimes if they're using the free version of it, like the name of the thing will be in the corner of it. And I'm like, ooh, I'm going to go download that and play with it for a minute, because maybe they're not even sure if they want to use it yet or not. But kind of going through and figuring out like what is it that other people are using, and was this a good workflow? Is there a good way of being able to produce that content the way that you need to? You know, everybody's different. And, you know, just from the beginning when we first started this, I opened this up with, should you use your phone? Should you use your computer? You know, not a whole lot of people were using like either like After Effects or using Final Cut or any of those sorts of things. So when you don't, you know, you can't use those things on your phone, but you can definitely use it on your computer. So you have the opportunity now, and you're sitting at your computer, give it a shot. See if you can do something a little bit different than what everybody else is using, because they're all using, you know, Canva on their phone to generate content, when you could probably do something a little bit different using something like Instagram, or I'm sorry, something like Photoshop or Illustrator or something. I don't know what happened in the chat. That was really weird.
Yeah, it looks like it's. I always forget to change over the actual chat, but well, and I think too, like, so talking about Photoshop or Illustrator, like those are, I feel like those are giant tools that take a giant learning curve to figure out and learn. But once you do, it's really, really beneficial. I haven't figured them out all the way. I just use them enough. I know enough to know that I get really frustrated that I can't do it.
I can rotate a photo in Photoshop. I'm great.
Yeah, but actually,
You make a circle though.
And that's one of the things though that I've been they're like the gold standard when it comes to photo and video editing, right? But with the gold standard comes all of the things you have to learn, but there's so many things available. And that's where it's like, maybe now time to take a beat and figure out how to use those big kind of overwhelming tools. Or it's time to say, okay, this is the project management tool we've invested in. Here's how we can like really deeply sink into like really solidifying what our processes are, and really like building out those template procedures and all of those kind of things. Where it's like, it's almost like, it's like our brains are overwhelmed with the newness and the constant change and the uncertainty. So maybe it's like, let's take a step backwards and see what foundational things we can really sink into and make commitments to, I guess is the word that doesn't really work, but is what I mean in my head. Like, how can we, like, where's that solid foundation, and then how you can make that work for you, but then also thinking of that way when it comes to, if I'm feeling like this and my network's feeling like this, the people I'm talking to are feeling like this, my potential customers are feeling like this. How can I help them feel like this is solid and grounded, and this is something that works now, but will also work in 6 months or a year or 2 years from now? And really like build in that marketing empathy that we have to be successful as marketers, is the ability to say, this is how I see things. This is probably how my customers see things. How can I use this feeling and this knowledge of this feeling to build a feeling that is the feeling I want to have them feel, which is a lot of feelings in one sentence, but. And that's where it's like, when everything's changing all the time and there is so much uncertainty, sometimes the best thing to do is to build that certainty and not, and to build that feeling of solid, like where it's solid, you know what the future is going to look like, you know, that confidence, I guess.
Right.
Right. Confidence in the product, confidence in the person, confidence in your own team and your ability to use those tools.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's things that I use still from, I mean, almost when the iPhone first came out, I still have apps that I'm still using from those days because they have evolved over time. You know, as I've been using the phone or using my computer, I've been using these different tools. You know, my tour tip of the week, this week is going to kind of work into that a little bit, because I used to use Photoshop a ton. And now I'm like, Photoshop, for one, it's a subscription model now. And I'm like, I don't need to have another subscription. But I don't need it anymore, because most of the things that I'm doing aren't really that. And Canva and those sorts of things have replaced, you know, the need for having to build something like that. Let's transition into that with our tour tip of the week, if you two don't mind. This tour tip of the week is brought to you by The Query. The Query is a show that we're starting up with Jason Cosper, in that he's a very smart WordPress developer. He also does e-commerce solutions for people, and he's one of those guys that you see him at a WordCamp and you go and talk to him and you find out, wow, this guy's really smart. And he just knows a lot about the technologies that are in play here. He's worked for multiple web hosting companies, so he knows how a lot of those web hosts are actually structured and how they work. And he also tests off of all of those different web hosts that are out there. He's used a lot of tools and technologies just to kind of make websites happen. And so what we thought would be a great idea is to be able to go, have a place for someone to go and ask a question, and then we'll record a video of him kind of answering those questions and kind of going through why he would approach a thing a certain way, and to kind of give you a better idea as to, instead of just giving you an answer, actually giving you why he came up with that answer. And so that way you can maybe go and fish a little more to figure out what you can do to kind of make those things happen. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to WPwatercooler.com/thequery. And that's where you can answer the questions there, as well as kind of get all those things going. We haven't launched the show just yet. We are going to be launching that pretty soon here. Commitments and a lot of things we got going on. So that's where we're at currently. So yeah, let's get into the tour tip of the week. Jen, since you're sitting in for Bridget, you have to go first.
Okay.
Do you have anything?
Yes, one of my friends, a friend of all of ours, actually. I'm gonna pull it up really quick here. I just want to make sure I say it correctly.
Yeah. And I can bring it up on the screen too.
Yeah, that'd be great. It's backupspeaker.com. I don't know it. Adam Silver, both of you, and he has launched this as a way to pull people together to be able to sit in on different speaking opportunities. And I'm one of the beta members or whatever, I guess. I joined about 6 months ago, but he just launched the website, and so it's allowing people to be able to find a speaker sort of at a last minute opportunity, whether it's virtual. Eventually, I think he's going to be moving into some kind of membership program where people can you speak at actual conferences and things, but it's a great way to kind of get your name out there right now. If you're wanting to be on that virtual speaking circuit, you could be part of this. And I think it's a great idea. And so wanted to bring it up.
That's a really cool idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's obviously still being worked on, but it's a great time to get involved. So.
That's cool.
I like it. And we have, especially when we're all working from home and all doing these sorts of things, we find, and I'm part of we use a company called StreamYard to do our streaming here. Their Facebook group goes crazy in the mornings because they're like, the person bailed out on me and I need to get somebody to help it. Does anyone know how to speak about? And it's like, some obscure thing. And then somebody's like, yeah, I know how the 1957 Chevys work. I can speak about that. It's like whatever it is. You're just like, are you kidding me? But these, yeah, I use those types of cameras. I'll be more than happy to come and talk on your show. So to have something like this with a backup speaker, that sounds like a really cool way of kind of solving that problem. And, it's different times we live in now. So being able to do this stuff virtually is pretty cool too. But I like the fact that he also lists like the areas in which they're at and what their radius of miles are and all that fun stuff. So very cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Amber, do you have anything?
I do. So we're going to talk about a retro thing that's been made new again. So this is a tool that my business partner is like, we should use this tool. And I'm like, not again, like another new tool. And then I kind of abandoned it for a while, and then I've come back to it in times of COVID. And so my favorite way to brainstorm is with a giant dry erase board, multiple colors of markers, Post-it notes, and my favorite people all in the same room, like creatively thinking about a problem we're trying to solve or a story we're trying to sell, and like really like workshopping an idea in person on a big whiteboard. And there's like something about the smell of dry erase markers that makes my like creative gears turn. And so this tool is Miro, which isn't new. It's been around for a while. It's miro.com, and it's a virtual dry erase board. And you can share it with people. It has sticky notes. It has that you can stick. It has really anything you need to do. But then you can like save your brainstorms. There you go. And you can co-collaborate. You can save your brainstorms, and you can build like whatever it is that you're working on. And so I have really come to rely on it, and I've actually like it more than real dry erase boards anymore, mostly because you can save your boards. And I used to you do a brainstorm and you take a picture so you can save it and remember it. And then, you come back later and like, I can't even read that. Like, what were we thinking about? And now I have a different board for each client where I have different brainstorms in different areas. I have my own personal board where I have different things going on. And it's become one of those tools that I use every day. So
that's cool.
That
no
is cool.
Connection or anything to them. So just use it because it's good.
It's like Google Docs for whiteboards. It's so neat. There's so many different little arrows flying around, and people are moving all the pieces around while they're doing video.
You pull out your marker now while you're using it, just so you can get the smell experience.
Yes, I actually have created a candle. It's it's dry erase marker.
Oh my gosh! Can you imagine if Miro made candles and then sent those out as gifts? Oh my gosh, that would be awesome.
You remember the smelly markers when we were kids that smelled like green apple? And I have those. That's like a collection thing that I have. So whenever my kids are like, hey, let's do a poster, I'm like, ooh, fun. And I get out my smelly markers. It's so much fun.
Yeah. So I love this tool.
Not bad. Price-wise? Not bad at all. So when you're using this, are you using their does it have integrated video, or is it or are you using something else and just using sending out a link?
So I actually have never used the integrated video. So the video is brand new. I haven't used that. So normally I have the I think it's the team model membership. We pay for it every month, and so then we can. So I can share the link and jump on and collaborate with people, and we usually are on like a Google Meet call, and then and I'll either screen share or they're on their own screen. So I haven't tried out the video portion. I need to try that out. But I also love it for wireframing, for website layout stuff too, because it's so easy to do on there. It's so easy to do it in a way that people can see and mess with it and touch it and give feedback, like clients specifically on like content feedback and things like that. It's the best tool I found for that too. So
that is cool.
It's a fun one.
I'm going to share this one with work.
They have an app for your phone too. So
cool.
There you go. And they have a fully functional iPad app as well.
Awesome.
Nice.
It's like having Google Docs. It is like having Google Docs for dry erase, for like the whiteboard, because it is it's accessible everywhere and everybody can see it and use it. So.
And it looks like if you don't need them to actually do anything and you just needed one person to run the show, you could just pay for the one account and do that. And then everyone else that's anonymous users is what they were calling it, could just watch it as it's being used.
Right. They can use it. And the other thing I like is it exports really well. So if you're doing it as you're in your own personal thing and you're building something for a client, you can export it as a JPEG or as a PDF, so you can export you can export the entire board as an SVG file, so that they can see whatever they need to see, or you can just they call them frames. So you can build frames inside of your board. So like I'll have one frame that's for a brainstorm, and one frame that's for, this is a wireframe layout, and one frame that's like, this is a content cluster idea brainstorm or whatever. And I can just share just that one frame too. So
that's cool.
And then just attach it to an email or a text or whatever.
Yeah. No, I like it. I think this is a great idea. I mean, with our meetings that we have, our all staff meetings, we've been missing this whole piece of being able to, put a bunch of ideas up on a board and have people see it. We see people like load up a Google Doc, and now you're just kind of stuck in this linear fashion of just kind of writing things out, unless you're building a table and then putting things inside columns. And at that point you're building a document, and it's like, you don't need the extra work of building a document. You just need to be able to like move the pieces around on the screen real quick. And that's what you get out of having markers as well as sticky notes, that you can move those sticky notes around, essentially highlighting and copying and pasting. So yeah, you lose all of that with a Google Doc.
Well, and losing, you also like learning their tools. We can just like duplicate sticky notes and it's so, the first time I used it was really frustrating because I didn't know all the shortcuts. And now that I know the shortcuts, it's really easy to navigate. But I also, I get stuck in Google Doc mode because as a writer, I think linearly. This is I think well in writing, and I think well in, Dane, we're talking about Miro.com. And so, but then I have my Google Docs becomes this cluttered mess of notes from a date from a meeting or a phone call. And then it's like, I can never find what it is I'm looking for. Like, it takes me forever. And so my new process has been to have a whiteboard for each client, and I have a notes section for each client. And then I'm constantly building notes onto notes without it being attached to a Google Doc. And then it's all in one place. So it's like become this organizational thing too.
But it's also still in the cloud, so you can access it from any device. It's beautiful.
Yep. So
cool.
I feel like I need kickbacks from Miro now, but it's a fantastic tool.
Hopefully I can get them to sponsor the tour tip of the week. How about that?
There we go.
So mine kind of goes along with what we were just talking about with Photoshop and using some type of photo creation or even photo manipulation. And so the app that I've been using both as a on my phone as well as on the computer is Pixelmator. And Pixelmator is, it used to not be as good as Photoshop, but it's getting more and more better at kind of, you're able to like, type on a path, which was just like something you just couldn't do in this. And there's a whole bunch of like just really great features that have been added into Pixelmator over the years. The interface itself has a lot of those kinds of being able to, do you know how floating palettes, the palettes are all kind of attached to that one interface that you're working with, which is a little bit different than Photoshop. Probably the hardest part for anyone who's trying to switch from Photoshop to this is the fact that a lot of the shortcut keys are just a teeny bit different, and maybe the tool set themselves is just a teeny bit different. But you get a lot of features with this, and the price of it, if you go and get Pixelmator Pro, you're looking at $39.99 for it, versus essentially having to pay for a rental agreement with Photoshop. So if you're trying to be able to, if you want to use something like this and be able to use it for quite a while and not have to worry about like, oh man, did I pay for that bill? Because I can't even load up a thing to go and edit photo, in Photoshop. $39.99, and you're at this point where you can do many of the things that you could do in both Photoshop as well as Illustrator. If you're looking for a competing product because maybe you tried this out and it just didn't work for you, there's a company called Affinity, and they make two different products: Affinity Photo and Affinity Draw, or Affinity something. I have both of them. Affinity Designer and Affinity Photo. Those two are also competitors of this, but when you're looking, not all of these are going to do exactly what you want if you've been living in Photoshop for decades. But, if you want to give it a shot, I say definitely take a look at it and try it out. They have a non-pro version of this as well if you wanted to kind of look and see how things work. But these are optimized for, the latest and greatest computers, as well as they work on older machines as well, where sometimes Photoshop just doesn't give you, that flexibility. But yeah, go take a look at that. You can go over to pixelmator.com/pro, and that's where that is. I'll make sure that these all make it into the show notes so you can take a look at those as well.
So Jason, are you using that like on your iPad Pro with your pencil and everything? Just no.
I'm not someone who draws, so I don't even have an iPad Pro with a pencil. I used to way back in the day. I found that I just never used the pencil, and the iPad was more like, I really need a computer to do this thing I'm trying to do. But on my being able to load this up on my phone and make some changes to it, or even load it up on the computer and use it to rotate graphics, to change the opacity of a layer, or any of those sorts of like basic-y type things, but just not something that I want to try to do in Canva. It works good. But there are things that, that you can do in this that you just can't do in something like Canva, especially when you start talking about being able to draw on a curve. Like having those pieces in there, it's not something that you're able to do with some of these online tools. And like I said, if you're sitting at a computer, you can now use these sorts of tools to check it out and play with. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. That looks cool. I'm gonna look into it.
Thank you.
And you can use it forever, which is nice. Alrighty, well, I say let's wrap up the show. Amber, can you tell folks before I get into our outro here? Can you tell folks where people can find you and how they can learn about all the cool things that you guys are doing over there?
Yeah. So I am at amplitude.media is our website. That's where you can find us, and or on social media. And you can find me anywhere at Amber Peachin, Pechin, on all the social media sites too. And we can be friends because that's just what I do. So yeah, if you want to talk about marketing, content marketing, branding, or creative consulting, that's our game.
Awesome. Well, it's always been a pleasure to have you on our show and hang out with us, and you bring a lot of insight to the topics that we bring here. So thank you very much. Jen, thank you for filling in. I really appreciate it. Bridget appreciates it as well. Thank you for hanging out with us. I'm super excited to see what people think about this episode. So thank you very much, guys. Talk to y'all later.
Right.
Here's our outro. If you want to help us out, go to patreon.com/WPwatercooler. Here's our fine folks that helped us out there. We really appreciate them. If you like this content, hit subscribe, click the little bell. That will notify you of upcoming stuff that we have going on. If you like this content and you're like, man, I'd really love to be able to listen to this while I'm in the car instead of watching us, totally understand. We make this as a podcast. It's available everywhere podcasts are available, so feel free to go take a look at that. Check out Apple Podcasts. If you use Spotify, do that as well. See you later. Bye-bye.